My ex-wife cheated on me, dumped me for another guy, and completely vanished for 4 long years. Then, out of nowhere last Tuesday, she showed up right on my front porch holding a little girl's hand. She didn't just show up alone either, my parents actually brought her. My mom was standing there holding a casserole dish, acting like they were arriving for a nice family dinner instead of pulling a total ambush on me. My dad just stood there right behind my ex with his arms crossed, giving me this look like I was the one being difficult for not opening the door all the way. Bethany started rambling, saying Owen was gone, she had absolutely nowhere else to go, and this little girl needed some stability in her life. On top of that, my parents started chiming in, telling me what a good man I am and how good men are supposed to step up and help out. Right then and there, the light bulb finally went on for me. They didn't actually care about me forgiving her. They just wanted me to take her problems off their hands so things would be easy for them. So I gave them a one-word answer. No. After that, I shut the door in their faces, swapped out all the locks, and started the process of completely cutting every single one of them out of my world. My name is Caleb Warren, and I was 32 when all of this went down. I make a living working as a ceramic restoration specialist at a regional art museum. The job is quiet, meticulous work. Most of the time, I'm sitting under bright white lights using tools so tiny they can hide right in the palm of your hand, piecing back together bits of old pottery, tiles, and porcelain bowls, stuff people figured was completely ruined until someone with enough patience took a real look at the fractures. I genuinely love what I do. I love the quiet, and I love that broken objects don't try to pretend they're perfectly fine. A crack is a crack, plain and simple. If a piece is missing, it's missing. The damage doesn't just disappear just because everyone in the room pretends it isn't there. Honestly, it took me a lot longer to apply that exact same logic to the people in my life. 4 years back, Bethany stepped out on me with a guy named Owen, who worked at the physical therapy clinic she was visiting for a minor shoulder issue. The affair had been going on behind my back for months before I finally caught on. When the truth came out, she didn't break down or cry, she didn't show an ounce of regret, and she definitely didn't beg for forgiveness. She just stood there in our kitchen and told me she needed to explore her feelings. Those were her exact words, explore her feelings. She made it sound like she was heading off to a weekend yoga retreat instead of completely tearing a marriage apart. She packed up and left within a single week. Owen actually showed up with his truck to help her load up her boxes. I still remember standing in the hallway, watching her walk out the door with the lamp we bought together on our very first anniversary. She left our dog behind, claiming it would be too complicated with her new apartment setup, but she didn't have any problem taking half of our savings with her. I guess that part wasn't too complicated for her. The actual divorce wasn't a huge drama, at least not from a legal standpoint. There were no kids involved, no messy battles over property, and no drawn-out fights in a courtroom. It was just a bunch of paperwork, signatures, dividing up what we owned, and the kind of deep emotional exhaustion that makes you feel like you're just watching your own life happen through a pane of glass. But the absolute worst part of it all wasn't even what Bethany did. It was my parents. I expected them to have my back. I wasn't looking for screaming rage or for them to completely disown her, but I expected some kind of boundary, or at least a basic acknowledgement that their own son had been stabbed in the back. Instead, my mom just told me that marriage is a complicated thing, and my dad said that these things just happen. Then he threw in a comment that I will never, ever forget. He told me that maybe I should look at what drove her to do it in the first place. Think about that, what drove her to it, like cheating was some physical destination I had personally guided her toward. While Bethany was busy loading her things into Owen's truck, my dad actually told me I should be fighting to keep her. The woman was literally abandoning me for another guy, and my dad honestly thought the real issue was that I wasn't trying hard enough to make her stay. My mom cried too, but her tears weren't really for me. She was crying because the whole situation was messy, because a divorce meant holidays were going to be uncomfortable, and because people at church would start asking questions. The picture-perfect image of her happily married son was broken, and broken appearances really embarrass people who care way too much about what the neighbors think. Once the divorce was finalized, my parents kept right on staying in touch with Bethany, sending her birthday cards and grabbing lunch with her every now and then. My mom would bring it up totally casually, saying things like, "Oh, I ran into Bethany at the store today, she seems to be doing really well." Like that was a completely normal thing to say to me. It was like I was expected to just nod along and say I was happy the woman who betrayed me was doing great. I didn't lose my temper or cause a scene, I just started pulling away from them. At first, it was a slow process. It happened bit by bit, shorter phone calls, visiting less often, only showing up for major holidays, and keeping every conversation strictly on the surface. If my mom tried to bring up Bethany, I immediately shifted the topic, and if my dad started lecturing me about forgiveness, I hung up the phone. As time went on, I built a brand new life that belonged completely to me, buying a small 1950s bungalow on a really quiet street. It has 2 bedrooms, old hardwood floors, and a front porch that's just large enough to fit a single chair and a little table. There's a detached garage out back that I ended up turning into my personal workshop. I did all the renovation work on the place myself, painting the walls, fixing up the cabinets, swapping out the cracked tile in the kitchen, and rebuilding the back steps. I found a lot of comfort in making old things useful again. My mornings turned into drinking coffee out on the porch, my evenings were filled with fixing up old furniture in the garage, and my weekends were spent hiking, reading, checking out estate sales, or just having a quiet dinner with my dog, Milo, who honestly adapted to the single life a whole lot faster than I did. There was zero chaos, no screaming matches, no emotional ambushes, and nobody trying to tell me that betrayal is a complicated issue. It was just pure peace. And let me tell you, once your entire life has been shattered into pieces, peace doesn't feel boring at all. It feels completely sacred. That particular Tuesday evening started out just like any other night. I was hanging out in the garage, sanding down an old vintage chair I'd managed to pick up at an estate sale, with some jazz music playing quietly on the radio. The garage door was cracked halfway open, and the whole place smelled like a mix of fresh wood dust and summer rain. I distinctly remember thinking to myself, right before everything went sideways, that I was genuinely happy. I wasn't ecstatic or thrilled, just deeply, quietly content. Then a noise caught my attention. I switched off the sander and walked around to the front of the house. There was Bethany, standing right on my porch. For a couple of seconds, my brain literally couldn't process the fact that she was actually there. She looked completely different, smaller, drained, and totally worn out. Her hair was grown out longer and pulled back into a sloppy ponytail, she wasn't wearing any makeup, and her eyes were completely bloodshot. She had that perfectly exhausted look down to a science, the kind people use when they want you to feel sorry for them. She was holding the hand of a little girl who looked to be around 3 years old, with dark curly hair, brown eyes, and a little pink jacket with a cartoon bunny on it. The kid looked absolutely nothing like me. Right after that, I noticed a second car sitting idle by the curb. It was my parents' silver sedan. My mom was already stepping out, walking up my driveway with that casserole dish held tight in her hands. That was the exact moment I realized this whole thing was completely set up. My mom called out to me, "Sweetheart," smiling away like this was just some casual, everyday visit. She told me she knew this was a surprise, but begged me to just hear Bethany out. I just stood there firmly in my doorway, making it very clear I wasn't inviting a single one of them inside. "Caleb," she said, her voice dropping real soft. "I know I don't deserve to be standing here." Well, at least that was a decent start, right? But then she just kept on talking. She told me Owen was completely out of the picture and things hadn't worked out between them. She admitted she'd made some mistakes, lost her job a couple of months back, and was way behind on her rent. Then she brought it right back to the kid, saying the little girl desperately needed stability. She told me her name was Lily, and she said it in this specific way like I was supposed to just melt on the spot, as if giving the kid a name suddenly made her my responsibility. Right about then, my dad stepped up right next to her. "She came to us first," he said. "She wanted to know if we thought you'd be willing to sit down and talk." Honestly, hearing that didn't make me feel any better. All that meant was they had already hashed this whole thing out before showing up at my place. They had planned the entire thing. They sat down and decided that the absolute best solution to Bethany's life falling apart was to dump her right on my front porch. My mom moved in a little closer, still clutching that ridiculous casserole dish. "She's going through a really rough patch," my mom chimed in. "And that poor little girl needs a stable home. You've got this whole house to yourself, Caleb. You're doing well for yourself. You could really help her out." I just stood there and looked at all three of those adults. I mean, I really looked at them. There was Bethany, putting on this perfectly rehearsed sad face. There was my mom, sporting this expectant smile, completely assuming that if she waited long enough, I'd eventually soften up. And then there was my dad, looking totally impatient with his arms crossed, like I was wasting everybody's time by not immediately saying yes. That was the exact moment the absolute truth finally clicked into place for me. This whole ambush had nothing to do with forgiveness. It wasn't about giving someone a second chance, and it sure as hell wasn't about doing the right thing. It was entirely about convenience. My parents didn't want to take Bethany into their own home. They didn't want to help her pay her rent, and they definitely didn't want a toddler tearing up their guest room. They wanted me to absorb the entire problem so they could pat themselves on the back and feel like generous, forgiving people without actually having to pay a single dime or lift a finger. And you know what? They had done this exact same thing before. 4 years ago, when Bethany first walked out on me, they tried their hardest to pressure me into fighting for the marriage. Why? Because her leaving was inconvenient for them. It made the family look messy, it made the holidays incredibly awkward, and it forced them to actually face the reality of a betrayal. They didn't care about the fact that she had completely broken my heart, they only cared that my pain was messing with their picture-perfect version of reality. Now she was back, and they expected me to clean up the mess all over again. I looked straight at Bethany. "We were really good once," she said. "Don't you remember?" Oh, I remembered all right. That was the whole damn problem. I remembered every single bit of it. I remembered her packing up and leaving. I remembered watching Owen load her boxes into his truck. I remembered my dad telling me I needed to fight for her while she was literally choosing another man right in front of my face. I remembered my mom sending her birthday cards like nothing happened, and I remembered slowly rebuilding my life, one quiet day at a time. "No," I said. My mom blinked in total shock. Bethany's mouth dropped open a little bit, and my dad's forehead wrinkled up into a heavy frown. I said it a second time, making sure I was completely clear. "No. Get off my property right now." Before anyone could say another word, I shut the door right in their faces. I turned the lock, and then I just stood there in the entryway with my back pressed against the solid wood. My heart was pounding like crazy, but my hands were completely steady. That was the weirdest part of it all. Even through the heavy door, I could still hear everything going on outside. First came my mom's voice, whining, he didn't even give us a chance to explain. Then my dad chimed in, his voice sounding much lower and a whole lot angrier. Bethany started crying, and I could hear the little girl asking a question that I couldn't quite make out. But I didn't budge. I didn't open that door back up, and I didn't even peek through the window. For 10 whole minutes, I just stood there. 10 minutes of their voices fading in and out. 10 minutes of car doors slamming shut. 10 minutes of my mom trying to knock on the glass one last time while my dad snapped something sharp at her. Finally, I heard the car engines crank up, and then everything went completely silent. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a cold glass of water, and sat down at the table. I wasn't filled with rage, and I didn't feel a single ounce of guilt. All I felt was pure clarity, like I'd been staring at a blurry image for 4 long years and it had finally snapped into focus. I sat there thinking about every single time my parents casually brought up Bethany over coffee, every time my dad lectured me about letting go of the past, and every single holiday where the entire family carefully walked on eggshells to avoid talking about what she had actually done to me. They had never once taken my side through any of it. They had just spent the last 4 years waiting around for the mess to miraculously disappear, and now they wanted me to be the magic solution. They wanted me to take Bethany in, give her kid a stable life, make my parents feel great about themselves, and make Bethany's bad choices incredibly easy to deal with. I don't think so. I opened up my laptop right then and there and started a brand new document, typing the word actions right at the top. Then I started making a list. Change all the door locks. Install security cameras around the property. Block my parents' numbers. Block Bethany. Block the rest of the extended family if they start giving me grief. Get in touch with a lawyer. Keep a paper trail of every single time they try to contact me. Update my emergency contacts at work to remove my parents. Redo my will and take them off as beneficiaries. I stared at that screen for a minute. None of this was about getting revenge, it was strictly about self-protection, and there is a massive difference between the two. Around 9 o'clock that night, my phone started buzzing on the table. It was my mom. I just sat there and watched it ring until it went to voicemail. 30 seconds later, my dad's name popped up on the screen. Voicemail again. A minute later, a text message came through from my mom. We need to sit down and talk about this like adults. You can't just completely shut us out. I read the words, but I didn't bother typing a reply. Instead, I opened up my settings and blocked both of their numbers on the spot. What do you think about this? Would you have done the exact same thing in my shoes, or do you think blocking them right away was taking it a step too far? Anyway, barely 5 minutes passed before another text slid through, this time from my aunt. Your mother just called me, absolutely sobbing. What on earth happened? Call me right now. Blocked. Then an unknown number popped up on my screen. This is incredibly cruel of you, Caleb. That innocent little girl needs help and you are being completely selfish. I knew exactly what that was, my mom using someone else's phone to get through to me. I took a quick screenshot of the message, created a brand new folder on my laptop called Documentation, and saved the file before blocking that number too. That was when it became crystal clear to me that they weren't going to just take no for an answer. They were going to keep pushing and pushing, trying to find any loophole they could to get around my boundaries. See, in their twisted minds, I was the one being completely unreasonable here. Not Bethany for stepping out on our marriage, and not them for constantly enabling her behavior. Nope, the blame was entirely on me because I simply refused to clean up a mess that I had absolutely nothing to do with making. Well, fine by me. Let them try to push. I was fully prepared to document every single attempt they made. I finally headed to bed around 11 o'clock, and I honestly slept better that night than I had in months. The very next morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table drinking my first cup of coffee when a pair of headlights pulled right up into my driveway. It was exactly 6:35 a.m., and it was my parents' car. I watched them through the window blinds as they climbed out of the seats. My dad marched right up onto the porch first and started knocking on the door, hard, deliberate thuds. It was the kind of knock that demanded an immediate conversation. I stayed right where I was in the kitchen. My mom followed him up and literally pressed her face and hands against the front window glass, trying to peer inside the dark house. Luckily, I was sitting just out of her line of sight. If I moved even an inch, she would have spotted me, so I stayed completely frozen. The knocking just kept coming. My dad reached down and rattled the doorknob, which was obviously still locked. "Come on, Caleb," he shouted right through the glass. "We know you're inside." I just took another slow sip of my coffee and didn't say a word. They stood out there on my porch for 5 full minutes, knocking, calling out my name, and trying to peer through every window they could reach. Finally, my dad threw his hands up in the air, snapped something angry at my mom, and they both marched back down to the car. I watched their taillights disappear down the street. As soon as they were gone, I picked up my phone and called a local locksmith. "How fast can you get out to my place?" I asked him. He told me he could be there by 10 o'clock, which was perfect. Right after I hung up with him, I went online and ordered a complete home security camera system equipped with live feeds and cloud storage, one for the front porch, the back door, the driveway, and the garage. By the time I actually left the house for work that morning, I had already blocked 6 more phone numbers. It was a mix of cousins and old family friends, people I literally hadn't spoken a single word to in years, but who were suddenly deeply, deeply concerned about my personal life. During my lunch break, I went and sat out in my car in the museum parking lot so I could email the attorney who originally handled my divorce. I kept it brief: need to schedule a consultation as soon as possible. My ex-wife and parents are attempting unwanted contact after I refuse to offer financial or housing assistance. I need cease and desist letters drafted and ready to go. I can meet anytime this week. He got back to me in less than an hour. I can fit you in this Friday morning at 9 a.m. Make sure you document absolutely everything. Save screenshots, records of calls, or anything else they send your way. Oh, man. I completely get it now, and I am so sorry. I dialed the different words and phrasing knob up way too high and ended up stripping out the soul of the story you wrote. Let's hit the reset button. I'm going to dial it back, stick much closer to your original text, and keep those specific details right where they belong, like the specific numbers, the exact phrasing of the dialogue, especially that line from the judge, and the proper flow of the events. Here is a version that actually keeps your story intact, just adapted naturally for that first-person, casual American guy voice. The final straw. I smiled. I was already a step ahead of him. The next few days were strangely calm. At work, I was restoring part of an 18th century serving platter. It was white ceramic with blue hand-painted detail and a hairline fracture running right through the rim. The damage was delicate, but it was honest. It didn't pretend to be anything else. Meanwhile, I kept my phone on silent. By Friday morning, my documentation folder had 23 screenshots, texts, missed call logs, and voicemails transcribed by my phone. I even had photos of my parents at my door. Everything was saved and backed up. At 9 a.m., I walked into my lawyer's office with the folder completely printed out and organized chronologically. He looked through it and let out a low whistle. "You don't mess around." "No," I said. "I don't." We spent an hour going over everything. He confirmed what I already knew: I had no legal obligation to help Bethany. My parents had no right to access me, and Bethany had no right to show up at my home. He drafted cease and desist letters to all 3 of them. No contact. No showing up at my residence. No showing up at my workplace. No third-party contact. Violations could lead to restraining orders or trespassing charges. The letters went out by certified mail that Monday. That weekend was quiet. I worked in my garage and finished the chair I'd been sanding the night Bethany showed up. Saturday afternoon, my new front porch camera sent a motion alert. I opened the app. My parents' car was in my driveway. They knocked. Waited. Knocked again. I was actually at the hardware store buying sandpaper, watching the whole thing on my phone. After 4 minutes, they left. They didn't see the camera. Monday evening, while I was cooking dinner, my phone started buzzing. The cease and desist letters had been delivered. Unknown number. Another. Another. 7 calls in 10 minutes. I watched the notifications appear and disappear, but I didn't answer a single one. I plated my dinner, sat at my kitchen table, and ate in complete silence. Week 2 started out quieter. 3 unknown calls Tuesday. 1 Wednesday. None Thursday. At lunch on Friday, I got a text from my cousin Iris, the only relative I actually liked. Iris was my age, worked as a physical therapist, and had always been considered the family black sheep because she got divorced and moved 3 states away instead of staying close enough for everyone to monitor. Her text said, "Hey. Heard there was family drama. You okay?" I replied, "I'm fine, set some boundaries. Some people didn't take it well." Her response came immediately, "Good for you. Your parents called my mom complaining. Whole families talking about it." "Let them talk," I wrote. "Doesn't change anything. That's the spirit. If you need an alibi or a character witness, I'm your girl." I smiled. At least one person understood. What would you do? Looking back at how intense things were getting, I've got to ask you, what would you do in this situation? Would you have held your ground, or would you have broken down and answered the phone? Monday of week 3 shattered any illusion that the cease and desist letters had solved everything. I was eating lunch in my car when museum security called. "Hey," Maurice said. He was a retired cop and the best kind of security guard because he took nothing personally and noticed everything. "We've got someone in the lobby asking for you. Says she's your ex-wife. Should we let her up?" My jaw tightened. "No. She is not authorized. If she does not leave, call the police." "Copy that." 10 minutes later, he called back. "She left. Didn't make a scene. Just looked sad and walked out." "Thanks, Maurice. Can you make a note in the system? If she shows up again, don't call me first. Just call the police." Already done. After work, I went to HR and explained the situation calmly. My ex-spouse may attempt unauthorized contact. She showed up today. Security handled it, but I want it on record that she is not welcome here and should not be given access to me. The HR representative, Gloria, nodded seriously. "We'll add her to the restricted visitors list. If she shows up again, security will handle it. You shouldn't have to deal with this at work." That sentence meant more than she knew. Because my own family had spent weeks telling me I should deal with it everywhere, at home, at work, at holidays, in my own life. Wednesday, a card arrived in my mailbox in my mother's handwriting. Inside was a floral Hallmark card. Her note said my father had experienced heart palpitations the previous week. He was fine now, but it reminded them that life was short and family was important. I read it once. No emotion. If it had been serious, they would have called 911, not used it as leverage in a greeting card. I tore it in half and threw it in the trash. Friday evening, Bethany's mother approached me in the museum parking lot. Her name was Patricia. I had not seen her since the divorce. She came out from between 2 cars wearing a nervous smile. "Caleb. I just want to talk to you. Parent to parent." "I'm not a parent," I said. That stopped her. "I have nothing to discuss with you. Do not contact me again." I got into my car and locked the doors. She stood there stunned as I backed out and drove away. By the time I got home, I knew what came next. I emailed my lawyer. Bethany's mother approached me in my workplace parking lot today. Parents sent manipulative card about health scare. Bethany showed up at workplace Monday. They are still attempting contact. What are my options? His response came 20 minutes later, "That's harassment. We can escalate to restraining orders. Come in Monday morning." I slept fine that night. No anxiety. No guilt. Just the knowledge that I was doing exactly what needed to be done. Saturday morning, Iris called. "Your mom is calling everyone," she said. "She's saying you threatened her. That you're having some kind of breakdown. They're planning an intervention tomorrow at your aunt's house." I almost laughed. An intervention. Because apparently refusing to house your cheating ex-wife and her affair partner's child was a medical emergency now. When? I asked. 2 o'clock. I'm not going. Good. Sunday at 2 o'clock, I was in my garage refinishing a vintage dresser. My phone stayed on the workbench, face up. Iris sent updates. They're still waiting. Your mom is crying. Then, your dad is angry. Keep saying you'll come around. Then, I told them you weren't coming. They didn't believe me. I kept sanding. At 4 o'clock, I think they're finally realizing you're serious. At 5 o'clock, everyone's leaving now. Your mom is telling people you've changed. I wiped down the dresser and applied the first coat of stain. They wanted a room full of pressure. I gave them an empty chair. Monday morning, there was an envelope taped to my front door. My camera showed my mother arriving at 6:17 a.m., walking quickly to the porch, taping it up, and leaving in under a minute. I did not open it. I drove straight to my lawyer's office and waited in the parking lot until he arrived. He opened the envelope. "It's your mother," he said, "begging you to reconsider. Says your father's health is declining from stress. Says you're tearing the family apart. Can we file now?" Yes. That same day, my mother called my workplace. My boss, Raymond, came into my restoration room with a careful expression. "Got a weird call this morning," he said. "Woman claiming to be your mother. Said you were having a mental health crisis and asked if we'd noticed concerning behavior." I set down my tools. "What did you say?" I told her we don't discuss employees with non-emergency contacts and hung up. Then he asked, "You okay?" I told him the short version. I cut off some toxic family members. They are trying to get around boundaries by contacting my workplace. I have a lawyer involved. There is nothing wrong with me. Raymond nodded. I've seen this before. People get desperate when they lose access. If anyone else calls, we won't engage. If they show up, security handles it. By Friday, the temporary restraining orders were approved. My parents and Bethany were served Saturday. Sunday morning, I sat on my porch with coffee, visible from the street. At 9:50, my parents' car drove by. They slowed down. I made direct eye contact with my mother through the passenger window. She looked like she had aged 5 years in 3 weeks. My father's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. They did not stop. The order worked. I took a sip of coffee and watched them disappear around the corner. The next Tuesday, they tried one last time at work. Security called. Your parents are in the lobby, Maurice said. They're insisting it's a family emergency. There is a restraining order, I said. Call the police. I already did. When I came downstairs, 2 officers were there. My mother was crying. My father was red-faced and arguing. My mother saw me. Please, she called out. Your grandmother fell. She's in the hospital. She's asking for you. I looked at the nearest officer. May I speak with you privately? We stepped aside. My grandmother died 6 years ago, I said. This is a fabrication. They are violating a court order. The officer looked back at my parents, then he nodded. They were ordered to leave. My mother looked back once as she walked out. I did not look away. I gave a statement, signed paperwork, and sent everything to my lawyer. He replied within the hour, this helps our case significantly. Bethany violated the order 3 days later at a grocery store. She approached me in the produce section, asking for 2 minutes. I pulled out my phone and started recording. You are violating a restraining order, I said clearly. Leave now or I am calling the police. People stared. She left. The video became another exhibit. At the court hearing, my parents and Bethany all showed up. My father tried to argue that I was having a mental health crisis. The judge asked for documentation, medical records, evaluations, anything. My father had nothing. He said, he cut off his entire family. That's not normal behavior. The judge looked at him and said, not liking one's family is not a mental illness. I will remember that line forever. Bethany tried to say she only wanted to apologize. The judge asked why she approached me after being served legal notice not to contact me. Bethany had no answer. Permanent restraining orders were granted for all three. 3 years. No direct contact. No indirect contact. No third-party messages. Violations would result in arrest. The judge looked at my parents and said, "Your son is an adult. He made his boundaries clear. You do not get to override those boundaries because you disagree with them." I walked out of the courtroom without looking back. My lawyer clapped me once on the shoulder outside. "That's it," he said. "You're done." And he was right. 3 months later, I am sitting on my back deck on a Saturday morning, coffee in hand, sun coming up over the neighbor's fence. No calls. No drive-bys. No surprise visits. No casserole dishes on my porch. Iris texted me last week, "Your mom stopped calling my mom. I think she finally gave up." "Good," I replied. Bethany moved 2 hours away, then apparently back in with her parents after another relationship fell apart. I do not feel satisfaction hearing that. I do not feel vindicated. I feel nothing, the healthy kind of nothing. Work is good. I finished restoring a 15th century Persian tile last week, and the museum director said it was some of my best work. I am teaching a community workshop next month on furniture restoration. 12 people signed up. Last weekend, I went camping with Theo, my friend from college. We hiked 8 miles, caught fish, cooked them over a fire, and did not talk about family drama once. It was perfect. I updated my emergency contacts, removed my parents, added Theo and Iris. I updated my will, too. Everything goes to charity now, specifically arts education and a domestic violence shelter. Not out of spite. They are just not my family anymore. Family is not blood. Family is who shows up, respects you, and does not treat your boundaries like suggestions. Yesterday, I was leaving work when I saw someone who looked like my mother from behind. Same hair. Same build. For 1 second, my chest tightened. Then she turned around. Different person entirely, and I realized something. I was not afraid. I was cautious. There is a difference. It is the same way you are careful around fire after you have been burned. That is not weakness. That is learning. This morning, I woke up and realized I had slept through the night without waking once. No anger, no anxiety, no what-ifs. Just peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you chose yourself when everyone else wanted you to choose their comfort. I spent 4 years thinking maybe something was wrong with me because I could not move on the way my parents wanted. But I had moved on. I just moved on in a direction they did not approve of. They wanted me to absorb the inconvenience, smooth over the mess, open the door, and take in Bethany to make them feel kind without requiring them to do anything difficult. I finally said no. Not with screaming, not with revenge, not with some grand speech. Just no. Then locks. Then cameras. Then paperwork. Then court. People call that cold. I call it self-respect. I finish my coffee and check my phone. Theo texted about another camping trip next weekend. Different trail this time. I'm in, I type back. I have a life now. A peaceful one, built on my own terms. No one is coming to my door with problems that are not mine to solve. No one is guilting me into situations I do not want. My boundaries are intact. My peace is protected. 4 years ago, Bethany walked out, and my parents stayed neutral. 3 months ago, when she came back, I made my choice. I chose myself, and I would do it again every single time. I stand up, stretch, and walk back inside my small, quiet, perfectly peaceful house. The door closes behind me with a solid click, and I smile because I finally understand. Saying no to people who treat you like a convenience is not cruelty. It is strength. And I am stronger than I have ever been. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you really like our videos, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.